Hey, welcome to another episode of the Rock Fantasy Files. On this episode of the Files, and another of our roundtable discussions of albums celebrating milestone anniversaries, we dive into two albums released in 1971 from England's progressive classic rock legends. Yes, both of them are reaching their 50th anniversaries, of course, in the year of 2021. The first one is the Yes album that was released on February 19th, 1971. The third album that was released by them in general, but the features guitarist Steve Howe, and the last to feature keyboardist Tony Kaye, who wouldn't return until 1983's 90125. The album is considered the major breakthrough album for the band as it was a critical success. The band was at risk of being dropped by Atlantic due to the commercial failures of the first two albums. It peaked at number 40 on the US Billboard 200. Another thing that we talked about last week with Tarkus, I don't want to go over how these albums were on the Billboard charts, and it's something you don't see anymore in 2021 music like this, unfortunately. Now, the second album is Yes Fragile, the fourth studio album from Yes. That was released November 26th in 1971. The first album to feature keyboardist Rick Wakeman. The album was a huge success, reaching number 4 on the Billboard 200 here in the States, fueled by the single Roundabout, which became a classic rock radio staple and at the time was an AM top 40 hit. It actually reached number 13 on the Billboard Top 40 chart. The album was also the first to feature the album artwork. We came familiar with them by Roger Dean. I've gathered a panel to chat about our favorite songs from each of these albums and discuss what we like and give each album kind of a rating of 1 to 10 scale. Let's welcome tonight's panelists. We've got Peter Pardo, of course, from the Sea of Tranquility. We got Rick Levante, singer, songwriter from Windsor, Ontario. He's got a couple bands up there that he's rocking out with, and he's a familiar bass on the channel, also on Sea of Tranquility. We got Denny Barth, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, from Canadian metal legends Aggression. He's from out in the West Coast. He's up in BC. I think it's raining or snowing there. And we've got Lou Cadorala, drummer from Rush Tribute Limelight and also the School of Rock. And we've got Rand Kelly, our Yes expert for the night. He's going to tell me everything I said wrong, probably, and he's also from the Sea of Tranquility channel. So welcome everyone to everyone, and I'm not going to go with my picks first. I'm going to try to give an expert to start this off, so we can follow. And how about we give the new guy to go first tonight? Rand, are you ready to talk about? Well, first, we'll talk about the Yes album and talk about our 3 favorite tracks, maybe from that album. Give it a rating, and we'll go around, and then we'll come back and touch on Fragile. How's that?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I'm the Californian. I'm from Redding, California.
Yeah, okay.
So, anyways, yeah, the Yes album was the first album I ever heard by them, and I thought it was their first album. I didn't know about their first two albums because they weren't released here in America. You had to order them as imports, but I didn't know they existed.
Yeah.
This is pre-internet, folks. Yeah, you had to go to great lengths to find things out. I missed out on a lot of concerts and stuff like that, but I did get to see Yes in 1972 on the Fragile tour.
Wow.
I'm going to go ahead and show this picture. You all know this, right? From the Black Sabbath, Master Reality. Yeah. Wild Turkey, Yes, Black Sabbath. That was my first concert, Las Vegas. That's the ticket.
Pretty good concert to be your first.
Crazy.
Amazing.
Very nice.
Amazing to go from Yes to Black Sabbath. It's like, what a difference in vibes.
Not going to complain, though.
That's where Rick Wakeman would guest on Black Sabbath album, right? That probably the relationship where, hey, man, we need a keyboard. Let's call Rick.
Yeah, I thought about that too. And the lead singer for Wild Turkey is Gary Pickford Hopkins, who ended up on Journey to the Center of the Earth.
And the bass player is Glenn Cornick.
Saw him too. Yeah, it was. Oh, they were good. I loved Wild Turkey. I need to buy Battle Hymns, but that's another story. Oh, I'm supposed to talk, huh?
You're supposed to
Okay,
tell us your
yeah.
favorite songs from that album.
Yes, yeah. 1971, of course. And what a great album. I mean, when I first heard them, it was on the radio and they were singing Your Move. And I didn't know what I was listening to, but I liked it. So I called the DJ up in Las Vegas and I said, "Who's that band you just played with the girl singer?" And he goes, "Girl singer? I didn't play any girl singer bands." I go, something about, you know, you, like take one move. I couldn't even explain it at the time. And he goes, "Oh, that's a new group called Yes." He goes, "That's not a girl singer." Oops. But anyways, yeah, fell in love with him right then. Went to the Bass Exchange in Nellis in Las Vegas and bought the Yes album and came home and was just floored. Yours Is No Disgrace just knocked me silly. I had never heard anything like it. There was nothing like it, in 1971. And it was so intense and so fast and just fell in love. I was just learning how to play guitar at the time. And I was like, oh my God, I love this guy, Steve Howe. He's incredible. And so it's been a love affair for 51 years, 50 years, I mean.
Mhm.
And anything else you want me to say?
Your 3 favorite songs from the album.
Oh, 3 favorite songs. Yeah, right. Yours Is No Disgrace, Starship Trooper, and Perpetual Change.
And your rating?
Oh, 9.5.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna. So thanks for your input on that one, Rand. And if you hear anybody giving any wrong information, please butt in and let us know. So next off, I'm going to move over to a fellow Hudson Valley guy here, Lou Alderella, and welcome, Lou, and good friend of mine from the band Limelight, of course, who we've seen many times. Of course, Rush and Yes, all this goes together in my mind. So, welcome.
Thank you, guys. Always a blast to be on with these. This is fun. I was definitely pretty excited when Stephen mentioned this one. Yes, was really the gateway for me into becoming a Rush fan. Yes, I started playing because of Keith Moon and stuff like that. Hearing things like that on the radio, it was like rock drummer or rock kid at first. And then remember, my folks always had music on in the house, and I can remember hearing Starship Trooper, things like that on the radio, and like, wow, this is really, really interesting. This is something that's really captured my attention in a different way. Like, really made me start to notice harmonies and vocals and things where I was just like, this is a cool rock song before that. So then getting into, I guess it was like probably one of my older cousins, I think, had the album, or either a friend of his, and I was able to get a chance to really sit down and listen to it, really kind of get into the tunes. And like I said, Yes was really the gateway for me into Rush and all the other prog bands that I really came to appreciate after. So this was a little bit of a tough one. I mean, there's only 6 tunes, and I got to pick 3 favorites. So it's like, okay, what's your favorite half of the album? So I guess if I'm going, I'll go backwards to forward. I gave this one a little bit of thought. Let's see. So number 3 off of Yes album for me would be All Good People. I love the arrangement of that, and that was, like I said, just really getting noted to the vocals and the blending of all the different styles, and that was really, really caught my attention. Number 2, I'd say Yours Is No Disgrace. Love the tune. It was like aggressive and kind of heavy. It's interesting to me how Yes always managed to maintain a heaviness when they wanted to, without being like distortion and loud and crunch necessarily in the sounds. It was just the way the music was structured and the way the guys played. So like, to me, Yours Is No Disgrace definitely captured some of that heaviness. I really like that, like being the rock kid. That kind of blended the new things that I was discovering with the older stuff I liked, I thought. And then for me, the number one has to be Starship Trooper. I don't know what it was about that song as a kid. I blatantly remember hearing that song somewhere. I don't know if I was in the car. I unfortunately can't remember the exact moment, but I know it from very, very young, and just it was always a melody and a song. Even before I knew who Yes was, before I knew what the song was, I had heard that song, and it was just like, wow, what a great melody, what a great piece of music. And then when come back around to knowing the album, definitely always stuck with me as like my favorite song. If I'm flipping around somewhere on something and I happen to catch it, it's one of those things like people say about certain movies. If I'm flipping through the channel, I can't change that movie or whatever. That would be a song for me. If I'm flipping through something and capture part of Starship Trooper, it's like, oh wait a minute. I got 6 more minutes. Hold on. You know, can't go anywhere on that one. The whole album overall, I would say I'll give it a 9. I'll give it a strong 9 because, like I said, it's not a lot of songs, only 6 songs. There's knowing what Yes developed into. There's still some stuff to me that I think came together a few albums later that would have maybe pushed this to a 10, maybe. But I'll give it a hard 9.
You're muted, Steve.
I'm muted again. Am I muted?
Got you back now.
There we go.
This darn Zoom and these microphones to me, I don't know. I tried to do a little vocal. It didn't. You know what it is? I tried to sing a little. That's why it muted. It automatically muted me. So speak to me of summer, long distance, run around. Anyhow. Starship Trooper. I'm mixing them all together here. So we're gonna move over to Mr. Pardo. Welcome to the show, Pete.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me again. It was a pleasure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love this album. Not the first Yes album I ever acquired. That was Drama, actually.
Really?
What Drama when it first came out, and then I moved my way backwards. But I enjoy the first 2 Yes albums with Peter Banks on guitar, but I don't really think they kind of figured it all out until this one. I think Steve Howe coming into the band really was the guy singing on the cake. And you got Bill Bruford on here, who's one of the greatest drummers who ever lived. And I don't mind Tony Kaye. Of course, he's not Rick Wakeman, totally different keyboard player. But this album is where Yes really started to sound like the Yes that we would know throughout the rest of the decade. And for me, my top 3 have got to be, starting from number 3, Perpetual Change. I mean, it's just a great, great song. And number 2 is got to be Starship Trooper, which is epic all the way. And number 1 is Yours Is No Disgrace. I will say I never need to hear I've Seen All Good People ever again. And sorry, Lou, I know you digging. I don't hate the song, but I always, again, it's kind of like for Thin Lizzy, The Boys Are Back in Town. It's like Seen All Good People and Roundabout are like the songs that everybody knows. Man, they have so much better songs than those 2. It's like, it's always kind of killed me how, the radio and record labels pick out specific songs. Because I mean, personally, I think Starship Trooper is like way better than Seen All Good People. But that's just me. I mean, it's classic. I know people love it, and when you go see them live, they have to play it. But for me, the 3 songs I mentioned, I like leagues better than Seen All Good People. But if I had to give this a ranking, there are days I actually like this better than the album we're going to talk about next. So I don't know. I'm going to give this, it's either a 9 or a 9.5, depending on what day you ask me. But I think this is absolutely terrific album, and great adventurous songwriting and playing, and wonderful vocals by John. And yeah, it's a classic. I mean, this is a top 3 or 4 Yes album for me. Easy. So there you go.
Cool. I'm gonna move.
Can I say something real quick?
Yes,
I messed up on my ranking because when I said Yours Is No Disgrace, I was going 1, 2, 3. So Yours Is No Disgrace, Starship Trooper, Perpetual Change, 1, 2, 3. That's how I did it. Sorry.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, someone commented when I was mentioning on my social media, and I had a picture of an album I was listening to. I think either Yes album or Fragile, and they were like, I think it was Yes album. Yeah, it had to be, because, and they're like, Pete Pardo's favorite song, "Seen All Good People." The guy wrote.
I know. Most people who follow me, I talk about Yes a lot. Most people know that Roundabout and Cenoga people are not quite high up on the song chain for me, but that's okay. You know, everybody likes different stuff, and I think too. It's like I've seen Yes a lot in concert, and they play those songs a lot on classic rock radio. So I think for me, it's more just complete burnout on both of those songs. And it's not that I just dislike them. I just never need to hear them again. It's more that I think than anything else.
Some of our viewers that aren't from Hudson Valley, we have a classic rock radio station in the Hudson Valley that's been there for years, and they're selective and they play the same songs over and over again. And those are probably the two Yes songs they play, other than maybe "Owner of a Lonely Heart" or something.
Yeah, those three are good, right? Yeah,
that's no deep cuts. So we've been plagued with that in the Hudson Valley for years, without too much classic rock.
Us two out here, they play the same 30 songs all day long. So
yeah, I think that's
why I buy CDs.
Yeah, good. The bottom square just below me, and we're going to go out to the west coast of Canada and visit with the Sasquatch, Denny Lawrence. Welcome.
Hey, thank you, Steve.
Good to have you on again.
Yeah, I mentioned this before. Like I was when I was young, I was not very mature musically. So the things that would get drawn onto would be like the Ramones and Kiss and things that were really easy to listen to. I had like older cousins that were into prog rock. So some of the prog bands kind of like hit me harder, and I kind of got into them first. Like Emerson, Lake and Palmer sometimes has really heavy moment that it's almost like noise. And I find that Yes, sometimes some of the song it gets heavy enough for like a prog band. It took me years to figure out what was the difference between the guitar and keyboards. Like sometimes I'm like, who's doing what? But when Yes has become over the years, when I was able to understand what was going on, like the Close to the Edge and Relayer and Tales from Topographic Ocean became like staple at my house. I would play all the time. But I went back to this album, and like Peter said, it's really when they found their sound, and that's when Yes started to sound like Yes. And even though it's not my favorite Yes album, there's some like amazing song on it. And the other story I want to quickly talk about is in Montreal. I was kind of like in a punk metal band, like when I was like about 14, playing drums. But it was a band like Crosstown that was playing prog. They were playing like Yes, and Genesis and all that stuff. And they had like amazing looking girls hanging out there. So at some point of course they were playing Rush, because it's Canada, you got to play Rush. So they were looking for a bass player, and I'm like, okay, there's girls there, I can. So never really played bass before. Kind of went home. They gave me a set list of ridiculous songs to learn, like 2112, Yours Is No Disgrace, Art of the Sunrise, like things that you cannot really learn overnight. But my motivation was so much there that I eventually ended up being able to play those songs. So on this album, my number 3 would be Starship Trooper. Number 1, amazing song, Yours Is No Disgrace, but my favorite on the album is Perpetual Change. It's not the album, I never really talk about it as being my favorite Yes album, but I still go and visit it quite often just because of these songs it's so good, so good. My ranking of the album for this one, I would still give it a 9, even though it's not my favorite album, because it's so well done. That's it.
Denny, that's a great story. Isn't it amazing the motivation of potentially meeting chicks, what that'll do for you, or what that'll make you do, right? I've never played bass before, and I'm going to learn these ridiculously hard songs because I might score with some women, right? There you go.
And you know what? It worked.
On the road.
It worked.
There you go.
The motivator.
I think the interesting thing is that there was the guys were going to play Rush songs in front of girls, and that doesn't usually happen. Maybe in Canada only. I don't know down here. It's mostly
Yeah, down here,
You'd be
rock shows and
surprised.
women, no, they don't mix.
Rush
No.
shows, or maybe even yeah.
You'd
Anyhow,
be surprised what happens in Canada, buddy.
good. And speaking of Canada, we got another Canadian on tonight. We just lost somebody. Somebody.
Lou.
Yeah, Lou disappeared. Anyhow, so we got Mr. Rick Levante also from Canada.
Yes. Well, my story begins where I was actually, just collecting music, and I go in a bargain bin, and this is actually the cassette called Classic Yes. And I may be about 13, 14 years old, okay, guys? And I only know that I think it was Owner of the Lonely Heart was the only tune, but I didn't even associate it as this band. But I really dig the album cover. I thought the album cover was pretty trippy because at that time I was just getting into Demons and Wizards, Uriah Heep, and little did I know it's the same artist. But at that time, you don't have that information in cassettes, as you guys all know. But what was cool was when I started to listen to this. And this is like a compilation of everything up to Wanderer's Stories. I think is the only song out of that one, but the rest is basically the 3 albums with Steve Howe in the band. And so this was a mission for me to go get CDs to get every one of these songs on the actual CD, actual album, and that's where the search began because like Rand said, they could pre-internet and you had to do a lot of homework. I went and got the library book and it has a big volume, I think 6 at the time, could have to redo it. So many albums be printed, they got to keep adding it, and you had to find where's this band Yes and what the order of it. So I had to do that. So when I go to a record shop, they would literally order it because, like Rand said, it became import. So I did get this originally the Yes album with Close to the Edge. Through just the vinyl in the beginning, and ultimately I would replace it on CD. So anyway, at that time it was bad condition. It's a huge record. It's snack, crackle, and pop like Rice Krispies, and it was driving me crazy. And it really bothered me because there's some of the parts I never heard it properly till I got to the CD world, which was in '88. I really fell in love with it again because I got frustrated with the parts that I wouldn't listen to at all. But anyway, the point I want to get at is this album made a great impression because at that time for adventurous music was like Band on the Run, which was how that song could change so much, or Rush is coming out with these albums, and that was pretty adventurous. But I didn't even know when the song began and end because it was so the ebb and flow of this stuff was so fantastic, and so I became an instant fan. And I got to concur with everybody; it's almost the same ranking order of my favorite. And I have to say, I like this album better than Fragile. But Fragile has some of my favorite songs of all. Yes, you know what I mean. It's like as an album as a whole, they could dynamic, and I used to always remember that. I used to always say they could one of those perfect side when you had the vinyl. You played side A, it's like perfect. You can't complain. So anyway, my ranking would be in order would be Petrol Change, then You're Just No Disgrace, and number one would be Starship Trooper, and that's because the cassette used to open with that, and I used to thought that was the way they open an album, right? And I got used to hearing it that way. And so when I got the original album, I said, "Wow, that's actually a better beginning. It's like a grand finale, if you want to know the truth. Down, 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 down. The way they jump in." But I was so used to that song being the opening of this cassette. It's still one of my favorites because I used to start the day with that, get in the shower, get ready for school, and out I go. So I would rank this album definitely a 9. Strong 9, and knowing what would come in a couple albums later, that would be like number 10. This is not a bad measuring stick. And for Steve Howe, what a present to come in. Like if you want, I mean, that was like a big game changer for the band, and it only get better. Rick Wakeman would come in.
Yeah. Cool. I guess it's my turn to move on with this, and my picks from this album are. Well, coming in third, no one's mentioned this song, and I really like Adventure. think that and I wanted to mention it because no one else has. I don't know if I like Yours Is No Disgrace better than Starship Trooper. I'm almost gonna say they're a tie. I mean, I still remember the talks by the water, the proud sons and daughters. The lyrics and that's the whole spacey atmosphere of this record. If summer changed to winter, Yours Is No Disgrace. I love that song, how it changes around that 4 minute mark and you get that da 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 and then the boom, and then at 5:23 it takes off again and then into that lead around the 6 minute mark. It's just Yours Is No Disgrace. Such a great song. Starting off this new kind of era of Yes. We're talking about Rush because I'm looking at Lou down there. Sorry. But yeah, I think that's and I'm going to give this album a solid 9.5. I don't dislike anything on it. I mean, it's an album if I'm listening to records anyhow, I listen to them from start to finish. And I'm not going to skip over anything on this album. And so that's my take on the Yes album. I mean, as I revisited these two albums, listening to them on vinyl here in the bunker, I call this the bunker, and I feel like I guess I'm back in the bunker like, with what's going on in the world around me. And on my headphones when I'm out hiking and walking with a dog, one thing that I pick up off of this of these albums and Yes in general, I just love listening to the bass, Chris Squire.
Oh yeah.
What a loss it was to lose him, from the rock and roll world a few years back. But I just hear that bass, and it just stands out on a lot of most of the songs. I just listen to that, and I'm walking around like listen to that bass line, and
One of the greats.
one of the greats, and
Any great harmony too. He can really sing.
Yeah.
for sure. So I guess we're gonna move on to Fragile now, and we'll go back in the same order we were in. And Rand, welcome back.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Steve, when you mentioned Adventure, I thought that was really interesting because that is the one song where it all sort of, it's all organ until you get to that song. And all of a sudden, Tony Kaye's on acoustic piano. It's a whole different vibe. It's very jazzy. Steve Howe is playing like Wes Montgomery type guitar, no distortion at all. And then at the end, he kind of adds it in. And just as he's starting to solo, Eddie Offord fades it out, and you're going, whoa, 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 what happened there? But if you buy the Steven Wilson CD remixed, you do get the longer version of Adventure where you hear where Steve is going with that solo. So if anybody ever wanted to hear that, they'd have to do that.
And it's also fair to mention the clap, that whole acoustic piece, kind of set that up for side two to have that kind of thing in there. Like every side had that kind of like solo moment.
Yeah, that's the one live song on there, and everybody's going, what's going on? I thought there were two guitar players. I was just learning how to play, and I could not believe Steve Howe could do that on stage. Even to this day, I don't know how to play it.
He's brilliant.
Okay, so Fragile.
Yep.
Right. I didn't know who Rick Wakeman was. I wasn't a Straubs fan. I wasn't a David Bowie fan. I did hear him on Elton John, but I didn't know it was him because I had no reason to know it was him. If I read his name, it wouldn't have made any difference to me. I was listening to him on Cat Stevens' Morning is Broken, and all of a sudden he's on Fragile, and Roundabout, just wow. It's like hearing that for the first time, and they were playing it on the radio in Vegas, and they played the long version. I mean, it was amazing. But that album was weird because it had those 5 solo spots on it, and so a lot of people kind of downgrade Fragile because of those, but I really love those. I like those solo spots, especially what Chris Squire does, and especially what he does on the Yes songs when he does the Fish for like 14 minutes. That is just unbelievable bass solo. So I have no problem with that solo stuff on Fragile. But Roundabout, great song. South Side of the Sky could be my favorite song on that album. I was like, when I first heard that, I was just like, oh my God, this is so cool. I mean, I never, and then when they go into Rick's piano play, and then I learned how to do all that. I learned how to play bass, I learned how to play keyboards. Not like Rick, but I can play some of that stuff when he goes up higher as he goes along, and then it goes into that long thing. But the vocals on that was just, you know, he used just to get dreamy, you know, and in the Air Force and everything, it was kind of interesting because, you know, there were certain things going around that you could partake of and make that music sort of extend itself a little bit than normal. But yeah, amazing. And then to turn over the record and hear 5% for Nothing, 35 seconds of Yes just going insane. And I didn't even know who King Crimson was at the time, so that wouldn't have even ring a bell with me for the weirdness of that tune. But it's hard to believe it's only 35 seconds. Some people think it lasts too long, you know, but then Long Distance Runaround is such a great song, and oh my God, and then The Fish, and then Heart of the Sunrise and Mood for a Day. It's just great album. Really hard to pick three. But okay, I'll do it right. I'll go backwards. 3 would be Heart of the Sunrise. 1 would be Roundabout, and 2 would be South Side of the Sky. I mean, excuse me, 2 would be Roundabout. 1 would be South Side of the Sky. I got the olds, man. I'm pushing 70, so. But yeah, I give Fragile a 9.
And I guess everything's scrambled here because we lost Denny, and I don't know what happened to him. And Lou moved around. So Lou's here still, so but he's in a different spot on my screen. But Lou, you're next in line, actually.
All right. Cool. Yeah, this one, this album was, you know, another one of those revolutionary, oh my God, changed my opinion of, you know, songwriting stuff, really drew my attention to, you know, I hadn't yet discovered Rush. So this was the band that really, again, opened me to all of that. And yeah, so many great things on this album. So I'm gonna, before I get to the 3, I'll take a quick second and I'll run through this really quickly because this is a story worth sharing. So I had the privilege of working for the guys back in 98, 99. So there's the set list that they performed on the night that I got, the nights that we worked. Some pretty good stuff on that set list.
Yeah.
I got all of it there. Okay.
My number 1 song at the bottom.
And right, yeah, that was the Roundabout Starship was the encore, and trying to be, I was just working stage and production, mostly production stuff with a little bit of stage help, and trying to stay out of the way, you know, respect the artists, you know, don't get in the way. So lunchtime, I'm sitting off in the corner trying to stay as far away from everybody as I can. I'm like off by myself at a table. This was at the Mid-Hudson Civic Center in the Poughkeepsie area for the Hudson Valley guys. They know where I'm talking about. And just off in a corner at the table, you know, minding my own business, eating lunch and watching the guys do their thing. And Chris Squire, who I had no idea he was as tall as he was, who happens to like kind of towering over the buffet line, making his lunch. And I'm like, wow, oh, cool. Look, yeah, there's Chris Squire getting lunch. Wow, well, this is great. And he just turns around, looks diagonally all the way across the room, straight at me. I was like, eye contact, beelines right over, sits down next to me. Like there's like 40 tables in the room. Comes over, sits right next to me and was like, hi, I'm Chris. Mind if I sit down and have lunch? I'm just kind of like, I know who you are. That was about the first thing I can get out was, I know who you are. And I proceeded to just sit and have like a normal, one of the coolest conversations ever about just like, you know, normal everyday life. And, oh, what's the Hudson Valley like? And just he was like the coolest, sweetest, most humble, nice guy. But I guess for him, it wasn't like I'm going to go sit with the band and do my normal thing. Like he's like, I guess I just want to go and talk to someone and just about what's going on for the day and get a little break from things. So that's my memory with Yes, and a very special couple moments with Chris just a couple of years, you know, before he passed, unfortunately. So, but yeah, to come back to the list, this one what so many great epic songs on this. Number 3 for me, I'm gonna have to say is number 3. I'm gonna have to. I went back and forth on this a little bit. Heart of the Sunrise. I'll go with number 3. Number 2, Long Distance Runaround. As a drummer, that Bruford part still to this day can give you headaches. It's so well done. It's just so fun trying to follow that without, hiccuping on that. Such an amazing yet odd part for what would be considered like a radio song. And my number 1's got to be Southside. I just kind of going back to one of the same reasons I said some of the stuff I did about the Yes album. Southside was to me all of those great things that introduced me to prog, but it had those moments of heaviness that I really liked in there too, which was like, oh, this is like the edgy side of Yes with some of that grit in it, which I really liked. And so yeah, that would be my run on that. And I guess again, I'll probably have to give this one a 9.5, 9.7, somewhere in there. This one's there's no skips on this. When I put Fragile on, typically it's usually like a play right to the end.
I never skip.
Once the record's got to skip it. Like Rick had.
Oh.
And then his Yes album down there. But yeah, Denny's actually got a power outage. They're having a big storm up in his.
Wow.
Oh no.
What happened to Denny? He's trying to reboot and come back on his phone, but I told him we'll kick him last. So, alrighty. So thanks for your input, Lou. That was a great story about meeting Chris and having catering with him there. Move over to Mr. Pardo.
So yeah, Fragile, or I've gotten used to trying to say it like the Brits say it, fragile, which I think sounds a hell of a lot cooler than fragile. Fragile. So I try to remember always to say that. Yeah, I mean, I think unlike Lou and Rand, I'm not a huge fan of some of the little solo stuff on here, and I think for me that always has knocked this album down just a hair. I personally, Cons and Bronze, We Have Heaven, and 5% for Nothing to me are just kind of like, they don't really interest me a hell of a lot. Although 5% for Nothing is kind of cool because it's like herky jerky, but it's just way too short. So for me, I would have rather have had another like 5-6 minute long song in place of those. But that being said, the rest of the stuff on the album is pretty damn terrific. And I will say my number 3 is probably The Fish, which I think is absolutely incredible. And I agree with Rand live even, that's just mind blowing. And I love it so much that I'm picking it over Long Distance Runaround, which would be my number 4. Number 3 is going to be South Side of the Sky, which I think this band ignored playing live for way too long. And, now we've heard them do it a lot, excuse me, in more recent years. It's just a terrific song that I think always got forgotten on this album. And my number 1 is going to be Heart of the Sunrise, which I always loved. An interesting little story here. Back when I first started playing guitar, like in the early 80s, my parents were like, well, you're going to take lessons for a little while to kind of jumpstart. I was like, okay, whatever. So I took lessons. I don't know, Steve, do you remember Zach's Music Shop in Florida, New York?
Oh yeah, I do. It was like a little house. I remember driving by it to go to the Warwick Drive-In, right?
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Little red house, right? So I took guitar lessons there.
Well.
And the guy who was the guitar teacher's name was Dan, and he was a very quiet, humble guy, and he was a huge Yes fan. So one of the first songs he tried to teach me to play was Heart of the Sunrise on guitar. And it's not a very easy song to play, especially not for like a 15-year-old kid who just started playing guitar like, 6 months before. And, all these years later, I still remember how to play that. I can play most of it. Yes is not the band that I play on guitar and stuff like that. But yeah, I love that song. It's nice and long. It's got all these different weaving patterns, and it's pretty aggressive. And I love the vocal part of it. It's just an amazing song. And it's one of my favorite songs to hear them play live. So Heart of the Sunrise, South Side of the Sky, and The Fish, 1, 2, and 3 for me. And I will rank this a 9. This is, 9's a great ranking. I still think I like the Yes album a little better than this for the reasons I gave before, but it's a top Yes album for sure. It's a classic. 9 out of 10 for me.
The guy that taught you at the music shop is Dan. Was his last name DeLillo?
I don't remember. He was
I-
blonde. He had like a beard.
Maybe not then. I had a good friend of mine in school, and one of our best friends actually, I think, worked there, and his father worked there too. If it's if it's the same place, its memory's hazy. I'm revisiting metal in the '80s, and then going back another few years to the '70s really hazes up, but it brings back some really good memories. A couple things I have to point out when I get my turn about some things
Very
with
good.
this album. But cool, Rick, welcome back.
Thank you. You know, with this album, like Pete said, and when it comes to those little solo spots, I did like the Move for the Day with Steve Howe do that. That didn't disappoint me. But the other stuff, I thought that was really kind of filler. But I remember putting on, because of this cassette I was telling you, and I had Heart at a Sunrise. This was a mission to get this album first, but just because of that song. So that kind of tells you where that song ranked for me. But let me say this though, I love how the album sonically sound. Like there's a progress that we're not mentioned here. That album, Yes album, is great from the composition part of it, the making sure everybody has their hands in it and everybody's fingerprints is all over the record, and then they made an extra effort to do that, giving each other solo spots. That wasn't the key to the success. It's those songs like the ones we talk about that where they all put that melting pot of all the best ideas involved. And so and I have a hard time listening to, even when Pete said The Fist, I consider that all part of one song, like Long Distance Runaround. To me, they've got to be called together. Like when you listen to hard rock, you put Heartbreak and Live and Let Me Made back to back. Or if you go Golden Slumbers from the Beatles, you're going to carry that weight in the end together. To me, it's one song. So maybe I'm cheating, but I have to say, if that's the case, the third song would be Long Distance Runaround, The Fish. To me, they're stuck together. I can't separate them, to be honest. And and number two would be South Side, of course. And I remember seeing them doing that on the 35th anniversary tour. And eventually John Anderson would come on the floor wireless, and he was right there. And I said, "Hey, John," and he gave me a big high five. And I was like, my heart was just jumping out of my chest. I thought, I just touched it. Yes, dude, man, I can't believe that. So anyway, that was a great show. And the highlight for me that moment was that song, because up to this point I've seen Yes about 6 or 7 times, and they always got to play. They have played Heart on the Sunrise, and they have played all the other ones, but that was a real nice gem. But to see that being played live, like you might think that might be impossible, but Rick Wakeman did all that whole thing, and back and forth, and it was just amazing to watch. And so that's one of the highlight memories of all the Yes shows. And I have every Yes DVD they ever put out. And that is one of my favorite, to have 2 concerts with that. So go to number 1 would be Heart of the Sunrise, because that was my gateway of going, wow, what a great band. Couldn't believe how much they could do in one song that up to this point, people who put a whole record didn't do as much work as that one song would take to do it. And I think what would fascinate me is, just like everybody said, the bombastic of the dynamic being so heavy, and then the quiet as a mouse, and then it's just all that emotion, and so theatrical, and it definitely got to be a lot to concentrate. But when you watch these guys performing at 15, 20 times, they perform it like it's us doing a simple rock song, they perform it like it's so easy. And I'm thinking how complicated that is, because if you really was a solo, all those parts, they don't really belong together sometimes. The bass player doing this and this, and the keyboard doing all that, but somehow it mismatched so perfectly. And so to me, it is a highlight of listening to music for Yes, because sonically I thought it was great, and I just loved the way they arranged everything. But it wouldn't be better than the Yes album. I still feel as a whole the Yes album is a package deal, but those songs I just talked about are so strong that it goes number 9 too. It par, just because the song's so strong, as a seesaw, it balances out. Even though as an album whole, they sing from start to finish, it's a perfect record, almost because of that one song we talked about that overplayed. Probably why it's 9.
Just because it's overplayed doesn't mean it's not good.
No, I'm just saying it's just that it runs its course, right? I
Yeah,
remember I
true,
probably
true.
felt like it was number 10 when I first heard it, probably because it was such a wow factor. But then when you discover closer to the edge, you know what number 10 is about.
Yeah, yep, yep.
Well, I waited 32 years to hear South Side of the Sky live to see it.
I bet.
Yeah.
It was a long wait, and they did tour that back in those old days. But what happened was it didn't work, and they dropped it by the time they got to California.
All right. Well, Danny Barther's lost power and he still hasn't come back. I tried to get him to text me his picks at least, so he should have been next in line. But I guess I will go now, and hopefully he might pop back in, or at least give me a text and I can give his picks. But I guess Rick, if you were finished, I'll move on to mine.
Yeah.
I'm going number 3. I'm going to go, and I don't know how you go against it a little bit because it's one of their biggest songs, and I'm going Roundabout. Yeah, it's kind of played out, but I don't listen to regular radio, and I haven't really for years. I don't work in a job where that's the only thing I have a choice of with the record shop. And sometimes when I let something sit for 10 years and I put it back on, it sounds great again, even, from any of these classic bands. I just love, the lyrics, like mountains come out of the sky and they stand there, and the 3:26 mark in that song where we just get that driving bass and the whole song just starts moving along and just awesome. So I'm gonna go with that for number 3. Number 2, everyone's mentioned this song. I thought I was gonna be the dark horse with the South Side of Heaven. As I delved into this album and to set up this episode and started dissecting songs, which I don't usually do because I used to listen to it from start to finish. It's a tale of a polar exploration gone wrong. I read the meaning behind the song. I guess they were talking, and because they're talking about the cold. Were we ever colder than that day? I absolutely love how it goes spacey at like that 2:30 mark and goes into this crazy. Like if you got it in headphones, it's just like John Anderson. I was singing it in the living room before in front of my wife, and she thought I was insane. I was like, na 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 na. It's just this constant going back and forth, and maybe you wish my microphone wasn't working anymore after that one. But then it goes back, like driving back in with a snowstorm and that stimulating voice of a warmth of sky. That song, yeah, it's just such a great song, and definitely it's really heavy at times, and it goes into that, like we were talking about, that keyboard solo, and goes into that whole part. And it's that's one of the great things about Yeso are all these changes and making them sound so good. Uh, my number 1 song is "The Heart of the Sunrise," and I have a little story which it might make not much sense, but it means a lot to me. And it's like that whole with the lyric "Love comes to you and you follow," and about being lost in the. And John says about being lost in the city. To me, it was more of a love story with me because I started but before I go forward with that at the 8:12 mark where it gets into that lyrics with a straight line moving and removing, it's such a great part of the song, I thought. But this song reminds me of the winter of '78. I came across Yes a little late. I in high school in '77 is probably when I first discovered them, or maybe in that winter of '78. I got a friend of mine turned it on. I was at his house. I'm like, what are we listening to? I knew Roundabout and I knew some of the stuff, but I got my first touch of it was Yes songs. That was the first album, 8-track I had. I used to listen to it driving around. And and it was the winter of '78. It was one of my first crushes. She was as mysterious as that song to me. I worked at a department store and I was in the tobacco department. It doubled as like the cosmetics. And when the staff would go on break, we'd go back and forth and work. And I got to hang out with a couple girls that worked there. And they were these 2 girls. No one could believe I was hanging out with because they were like disco chicks a little bit. They dragged me off to like discos and clubs. But when we got back to the pad or to hang out with them before or after, we'd be just listening to like Yes and ELP and like Zeppelin and stuff like that. So they were like rocker chicks, but they would bring me out and this other thing. And I really was infatuated because I was a young kid and was like one of my first dates, and I'd hang around with these girls. And one day, she just up and disappeared, never to be seen again. The heart of the sunrise. So
I can relate.
that's my story. Yeah, you were talking about Yes the other night on Pete's channel about something hanging out with a girl and
Yeah.
candlelight and Yes, and then another song come out and it was over. You were saying. I remember that
Yeah,
story,
she
man.
loved Tales from Topographic Oceans, but hated Relayer, and she couldn't understand why me and my friends were sitting around listening to Sound Chaser over and over and over. And she just split, stopped coming around.
It's funny how me and Danny both had stories about girls liking Rush and Yes, and you don't see that
Heard
much
them.
nowadays. At least in the States here. I mean, people in Europe are probably, oh, these guys are nerds over here, but you know, different areas of the world is probably different. But Lou, you probably have a bunch of Rush groupies when you guys play out, right?
Well, that's a loose description, but you know, there are some of the
Sausage
regulars.
fest.
Yeah, that's a better description.
So it doesn't look like Denny's coming back. Let me see if he did text me anything and for his picks before he wrapped this up. It would have been great to hear his input, but he's lost power and I guess he hasn't come back. But I thought this was a fun episode tonight, and I guess I would give Fragile. I'd give it a 10. I think. I mean, I don't mind those like Pete. Like I'm a little bit like Ram with this, and it all blends together because I was listening to Roundabout with my wife in the living room, just going through some of the videos and stuff, and I'm immediately thinking, I'm going right into Brahms after this. My head immediately starts to hear that song when that's over. And to me, like they could be filler to some, but it's almost like intros and outros to me with this whole album. And you know, it's an album that's close to my heart.
Well,
And
you know, some of those so-called solo spots is Yes. I mean, We Have Heaven is the full band,
yeah,
and so is The Fish.
sure.
Yep.
Yeah,
You guys want to hear some trivia about 5% for Nothing before you sign off?
yeah, go for it. Got a couple minutes, I'm sure.
Bill Bruford was asked about that, and he said it relates to the producer of the first album, Paul Clay, because he did such a bad job, we didn't even want to pay him, so we decided that we would give him 5% for nothing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was a terrible production.
Yeah, true.
And Tony Colton isn't much better on Time and a Word, but I do love that album. I got to say, that's the fastest Bill Bruford stuff you'll ever hear. And yes, and he's playing super lightning quick on some of those songs, Then and Every Days and Astral Traveler. Lots of fast drumming on that album. Oh, that's what I was going to say about Yes being heavy, sounding heavy, but not really heavy. I think it's Tony Kaye's organ that makes the band sound really heavy. It's like a wall of sound when he plays, you know, like on Years of No Disgrace and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Just fills the whole thing. It's just
Yeah.
unbelievable.
I remember when we got the album of Fragile, and you and at the heart of sunrise, it does that reprise of We Have Heaven. I didn't have that in the cassette, and that threw me off because what the hell, what happened here? And it came back, and I remember that started me. But I'm thinking, oh wow, is that where Paul McCartney did it? Because he would put the album later, Band on the Run, open the track with Band on the Run as a reprise at the end of 1985. He comes back with Band on the Run chorus part. And I was wondering, I wonder if that's where he got that idea from, because it did come out before Band on the Run.
Hey
But
Rick, if you buy the Joe Gastwart remaster of Fragile, you won't hear that. It just ends on Heart of the Sunrise. And somebody asked him, how come you didn't let it play the steps into We Have Heaven? He goes, I didn't know it was there. Nobody said anything.
Epic fail.
Stephen Wilson knew, and his remix has it.
So,
But this
well,
didn't have
that's
it back in the
that's
day.
why Pete told me, he said, well, we got to get Rand on the show. And I said, well, we need not that Pete's not a Yes expert, but I guess you're a Yes expert over there.
Thank you
So,
so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
all right.
This is my
Any
territory.
any last notes from anyone? Do you anything else interesting?
Well, I got to meet Yes 20 years ago in Clear Lake, California.
Oh, okay.
That was pretty cool. Shaking John Anderson's hand was a religious experience. I swear to God, I mean, I did, and I just felt electricity come right through my body. Never happened with Chris Squire. I shook Steve Howe's hand, and everybody says you can't shake Steve Howe's hand. I did. I used my left hand, which is my weak hand, and I put it out there like I could barely hold it up. And he just grabbed it and said, "Nice to meet you, Ron."
No, you mean he said, "Ren, it's so nice to meet you."
Steve Howe? Yeah, they were great. I mean, it was
Very,
just
very nice.
That
that was
sounds,
when I met Tom Brislin. He was their keyboard player.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Sounds
he was a
sounds,
great too. He was great too.
the Steve Howe handshake sounds like what the professional wrestlers do. 'Cause they don't want to put anyone over by giving you a strong handshake. So you just kind of just palm. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where, that's probably where this stuff started.
Now it's COVID. You got an elbow, right?
They didn't, yeah, right.
wave.
All right, guys. So, what do you got coming up there, Pete Pardo, on the Sea of Tranquility channel? You're always so busy. This is probably your 10th show today.
Yeah, not quite. I just posted my top 30 albums of the year a
No?
couple of years ago, so that's live on the channel. We got the Monsters Den with Chris Allo and Jamie Laszlo tomorrow, and geez, what else is happening? Martin Popoff and myself are going to, this is an interesting show. So Friday morning, Martin and I are going to deconstruct the new Deep Purple covers album called Turning to Crime. So we've called it Turning to Crime 2.0. And if we were in charge of telling them what to put on that album, that's what the show is all about. So we're each going to give you what we would have liked to have seen Deep Purple do on that album. So that's Friday morning. And yeah, but otherwise, normal stuff on the channel. Going to be a little light on programming for the next week or so for the holidays, but we're still there every day.
And I'd like to thank you, Pete, for helping me out with touching some of this prog and classic rock on my channel, of course, and not the usual format, and maybe not the usual format, but not the usual subject matter. As we've been, we do death metal and thrash metal and a little bit of everything on this channel, and it's great to touch on these anniversary albums, and we hope to round up next Wednesday and do a couple more. So thanks to everyone for joining us, and Lou, it's always a pleasure to have you on, and Rand and Rick, and
Thank you.
bye everyone, and stay heavy, and please hit a second and subscribe. I'm almost up to 3,000 subscribers, so we're working it. And everyone have a great holiday, whatever you celebrate.
Happy holidays.
Stay safe out there, and give everybody a hug.
Thanks for having me, and enjoy all. It's been great. Have a great holiday season, everybody.
Oh yeah, and Lou's
Yeah.
I'm breaking the news on here. Stern will fire me, but I don't work for him. But the Rush pinball's coming out.
Nice.
And I don't think we can announce that on here, but I think Lou's going to be playing a big pinball convention coming up next year. So because of the pinball, so that's all we can say tonight. But Rush is coming out with a pinball machine, and we're going to have a fun time with that when it comes out, and it'll be at Rock Fantasy. All right, guys.
Looking forward.
Cool.